Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and today we're going to be having a look and comparing this made in Japan Edwards, very recent 2014 Les Paul Custom, a 130CD, with this Orville by Gibson 1990 Les Paul Custom in the Alpine White. They look quite similar outside of the actual finish color themselves. How are they in practice? Now on paper, these two might look pretty similar. They both have the same scale length, traditional to a Gibson, 23 3/4. They both have Seymour Duncan humbuckers. These have the Saturday Night Specials. The other one, the tried and true classic 59 and JB combo. Both have Goto hardware, really high quality components in that sense. And well, they hit the aesthetic of an American Gibson Les Paul Custom pretty close in my honest opinion. So what separates these two things? Before we dive any deeper, let's do the obligatory sound samples and get that out of the way. Alright, now that we have a baseline for how they sound, I'm going to break down each of these guitars individually, then give a kind of final synopsis at the end. Let's begin with this one. This is my 1990 Orville by Gibson Les Paul Custom with a rosewood, not ebony, fingerboard. It was rare to find an ebony fingerboard on these, but they do exist. However, even with Gibson's own models, there have been times where Les Paul appointed guitars did not have an ebony fingerboard. For a while they were using rich light, and on some models they still do. And when you look at the custom lights, 2013, 14, and 16, I believe, those had rosewood fingerboards. So it's not the first time that I've seen a Les Paul custom guitar authorized by Gibson or by Gibson themselves that has a rosewood board, but it just kind of looks a little bit off. It's dark, it's not the end of the world, but it's something worth noting. Leaving it to the neck itself, the shape of the neck. This is where you immediately notice the difference between the Orville and the Edwards. This has a much thicker neck to it, and it kind of progressively gets a little bit thicker as you go up it. It's very, very vintage flavored, and I greatly prefer that when it comes to rhythm work and just really wanting that kind of vintage feel and the experience that you get with these older kind of guitars. Now, this guitar was made in 1990. Technically, anything over 25 years old is considered vintage. I don't consider any guitars from the 90s or even the 80s really vintage guitars. That's just me. But outside of that, the way that this guitar kind of just encourages me to play it, at the very least, it's a lot more mellow than the Edwards. The Edwards is a lot more upfront and kind of in your face and so smooth. This is a little bit rough around the edges as far as the playability, and I don't mean that it plays uncomfortably or anything like that, but just it's more traditional to a Gibson Les Paul, and obviously you would expect so because it was authorized by Gibson to be made. Now let's shift our attention to the Edwards Les Paul Custom. This one does have the ebony fingerboard on it. The frets are immaculate on this guitar. This guitar just plays itself, and it's not too dissimilar to other high-end Japanese guitars that I've played from other manufacturers and ESP themselves from their core line. It's just so fast playing, and one difference between this and the LTDs that I've played, and even some of the core ESPs, they have a really thin U to them, and you either really like that or you don't really like that. If you're more of a vintage flavored person, you might really think out of the box you would like the Orville better, but this, it's not like that. This one has a little bit more beef to it, granted not as much as the Orville, and it definitely does not taper in the same way, kind of increasing as you go up the neck. It continues to have that really slim, fast playability on it. And one thing that leads me as a player to want to do, I am not a lead guitarist. I'm not really a great guitarist in any sense of the word, really, but it gives me more confidence once I hit kind of maybe the 9th fret and all the way up to kind of try things. It feels like it's a lot more forgiving. I don't have to be as zoomed in and zoned in rather when I'm trying to play leads or anything on that register of the guitar. It inspires confidence to it. The attention to detail on this is superb. It's second to none. Everything from the way that the binding is done to the way that the nut is kind of sealed incorrectly. It looks like one perfect piece of art in that sense. It's got a good weight to it. It's 9 pounds. I really like the combination of the JB and the 59, and I think that this is such a good modern take on the Les Paul. And if it were up to me and I was running Gibson, instead of having a Les Paul Studio, I would be building this exact guitar and offering it for $1,500. It would add a little bit of diversity to it, but you know, when it comes to having all of these expensive parts onto it, it's probably not going to be something that's tangible anytime soon. And as to be expected, even when you buy the exact same model from the exact same brand, even from the exact same year, these two do have tonal differences. I find acoustically this one rings brighter. It has a little bit more of a bell-like quality to it, whereas the Orville's a lot more mellow. Maybe that has to do with the older hardware on it. Not so sure, but sometimes it could be other things too. It might be just the nut on this compared to the nut on that. It's all in the details, but this guitar just plays exactly how I would want a modern style Les Paul to play, and I really enjoy it for that sense. And it's one of those instances where I could justify having both of these. And despite the fact that they look identical as Les Paul Customs, they play and feel so differently, and more importantly, kind of inspire me to play very different things when I'm holding each one in my hands. And I can't say enough good things about both of them, but really just the fact that you can get an Orville for about $1,500 to $2,000, and when you look at the American counterparts to that right now, you're looking at either a used standard if you're lucky at this point, or new, a classic or a Les Paul Studio. And I guess if you're looking for something that is going to retain its value, as long as it's an Orville by Gibson, I think you're going to be in good shape. If it's a regular Orville, it's not going to hold its value nearly as well when compared to a Gibson alternative, which would be, in this case, a classic new, would be $2,000. The Studios, they don't really hold their value as much, and I really think, even though the binding doesn't really do anything, just the aesthetic of it, it looks like a classic thing, and that has inherent value in it of itself. So as a final kind of breakdown here, if you want a more true to Gibson experience, obviously, I'd go for the Orville. If you want something that's more modern employment but has the classic look, this just does it. And, you know, due to trademark and patent laws, they're not allowed to offer it in this kind of 4-knob configuration with the smooth out and the kind of book at the top of the headstock. You get an altered variation on the LTD versions. You can't get this in America, but I will tell you, if you can find one used in person, give it a try. You might be really surprised and really happy with it. I think that both of these are definitely harder to come by in the States, but they're not something you should turn away from just because they don't just say Gibson on the headstock. So feel free to leave a comment letting me know which one of these two guitars you would lean more towards, the more modern flavored Edwards /ESP or the Orville by Gibson that's much more true to the vintage style Les Paul. But that's going to be where I'm going to wrap things up for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you tomorrow for another guitar related video. Take it easy, you guys.